Hello everyone, and welcome to Mitchell Giddings Fine Arts. Thank you so much for supporting the gallery and our artists, and of course for being here tonight to celebrate our feature artist, Donald Saaf. Donald is an amazing artist, many of you know that. His work is recognizable with its painterly, playful, populated, communal landscapes. He refers to several folk artists as influential and important to his art, and we see that in his people's primitive movements and gestures. What sets Donald apart is the sophistication of his multi-layered narrative and how he conveys his message through a personalized vocabulary of, for instance, his signature halos and multiple heads. Beyond that, what a joy to be in the presence of Donald's festive and important paintings and sculpture. Please welcome Donald Saaf.
Thank you. My wife told me to keep this brief, but so I thought I would give you kind of life history. I'm going to start before I was born, and just tell you about where my family came from. So I'm going to. So my parents were Swedish immigrants, and my grandparents came over in the 1920s during the Depression, and they settled here. I came from kind of a long line of crofters, which is like a tenant farmer over there, because I know that because my aunt researched the family tree. So my grandfather was a carpenter, and my dad was a carpenter, and my dad, there was a big community of Swedish immigrants in Connecticut that really stuck together, and my dad met my mom at a dance, and they got married. They had 4 kids. And we used to really love to draw and paint and make pictures. But so one thing we really like to do is make these comic books in my cellar. And my parents really didn't buy us art supplies, but my aunt worked at Travelers Insurance, and she would bring these big boxes of form letters, and we would fold them in half, and it was like before the shredding machines, and so we would fold them in half and make books and make our own comic books, and we would just spend hours and make like multiple, do like 20 in a series of a particular character. And we're just very engrossed in that, creating our comic books. The other thing we used to do that really made a big impression is we had clay, and we would make this clay village in our cellar. And my sister was sort of the ringleader, and she wrote like a whole history of the clay people and the traditions, all these different, like the whole history of the village. And we all had our own characters, and we used to just spend hours playing with these clay characters in the basement. And both of those things really made a huge impression. It's like finding like clay and used paper, and through some kind of alchemical process, creating, like, it seemed really magical to me as a child. And my parents were just high school graduates, so they didn't really have any interest in art. And but the one thing they did have in common is just that they came to this country and they really didn't have anything, and they sort of created this world in an alchemical fashion in the same way. Let's see. When I got older, I went to the museum school. I moved to Boston. I was a cab driver, worked in a bookstore, and then I decided I wanted to go to school. So I went to the museum school, and back then, first I had a job at the Gardner Museum, where I met Julia, my wife, and I put together a portfolio and applied to the museum school, and I got a scholarship there. So I went there basically for free, which was really amazing. After that, we got traveling scholarships, and we lived in a few places. We lived in Mexico for a year, and this was back in 1990, and it was just amazing to suddenly be in a position where we were sending paintings back to Boston and selling them and just living as artists, and that's what we've been doing since 1990. So, a little more background. We lived in Mexico, then we moved to New Orleans, then we moved to rural Nova Scotia, and we were painting there. And finally, when our older boy was born, we moved to Vermont, and we've been here for about 20 years. And we've basically been able to make a living as painters, and which is not everybody. You know, I say that living with quotation marks, definitely. But so I wanted to show you a little retrospective of some of my paintings. And I have about 20 slides here. It ranges from 1990 to today. Yeah, maybe that'd be good to be a little bit darker. There we go. Oops. There you go. So this is a painting I made when I was at the museum school, and I still have it. And in the past few years, I've been doing these oil paintings, which have many, many layers, you know, very slow process. And I recently this year dug this painting out and realized that I needed to get back to something that basic. So this has been sort of like an inspirational painting to me, just a reminder to me all the time that I can always, it's the place I want to get back to. It's an oil painting, but it's really like a drawing. This is something from Mexico. We were renting a house in a little village, and I had an outdoor studio that had 4 walls, but no roof. And I used to sit in those big windows, and these little baby goats would come by, and there were quite a few times when I'd be sitting there and a goat would actually jump on my shoulders. Picture from Guatemala. You know, and I was kind of influenced by primitive Mexican paintings, but also from a tiny Hindu watercolor book that we had brought with us. I think that's where this composition came from. We left Mexico and we lived in New Orleans for a few years, and this is from that. time period. This is our backyard. After that, we moved to, we bought a little red house on the eastern coast of Nova Scotia. There's probably like 10 houses in this town. And when we moved there, we didn't have running water or anything. We just, very primitive living. And after, this is when we moved back to Vermont. And moving back to Vermont was like coming to the big city. This is from a show I had at the Spherist Gallery. It was based on alchemical drawings. Sort of peaceable kingdom here. I think I made this, we were living in Saxton's River for 18 years. And this is from that period. And this is where I started to really use cloth, decorative paper, and integrated that into the paintings. This is a big painting. This is about 7 feet high, I believe. I don't know why it's cut off a little bit at the bottom here. This is from a trip I took to Nova Scotia where I went by myself and just stayed in our little cabin for a month. I made a series of paintings. This one somebody bought it, and then they asked me to take out, years later, they asked me to take out the sinking ship, which I did, and I kind of regret it now because I think it's important. But
did they pay you for that?
no.
Oh, that's even worse.
This is our street, Grove Street, Saxon's River. Some photographic elements in there. Laundry. Bellows Falls. And this is, I was really thinking a lot about memory, and so these paintings were kind of a memory journal, sort of like when you're walking down the street and you have in your mind kind of the overview of the street, and also you're seeing faces walk by you close up, and so it's really like a lot of memories layered of different moments as you're walking down the street. That's how I was thinking of it. This is a pretty big painting. This is a 10-foot long painting. It's up in a library in Rutland right now. So I'm kind of, I have a lot of different influences, but one of them is early American quilts. I kind of like that overall composition. And I guess this might be the last one. This is a project that we did for the Brattleboro courthouse. And we designed the windows, and that's sculpture down below. And Julia, my wife, did a lot of paintings on the inside. And this is one of my new pieces. And these new collages here, they sort of came from the fact that I was just like spending years on paintings. And I really felt like I had to break it down and do something much more direct. And so I started doing basically a painting a day and using scraps, using bits of cloth, using walnut ink. And so that's the past 26 years. So that's my slideshow for the moment. Thanks. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about the third thing. And it's something that I think about when painting. And it comes from this poem by D.H. Lawrence. Water is H2O, hydrogen 2 parts, oxygen 1. But there's also a third thing that makes it water, and nobody knows what it is. The atom locks up 2 energies, but it's a third thing present which makes it an atom. So, I think of the third thing in a couple of different ways. One way it's like the old Bob Dylan, thinking back on the young Bob Dylan and thinking like, who was that guy? And like, what happened to him? How did he do it? And because he had, in many ways, he was just a typical folk singer. He could write songs and he could play guitar, but he had the third thing too, which is like this unmistakable, weird, undescribable force. And I like to think of it kind of like an electrical cloud. I like to think of painting or creating like sort of like radio waves or an electrical cloud that's and lightning forms. And they've taken photographs, so they've discovered that when lightning comes down, just before it hits the ground, a little bolt of lightning goes up and it meets. And so I like to think of being an artist like just being a good conductor. And that kind of takes away the idea of like you are the creator. It's more like it's like you're the doorman of a hotel and there's people, you can't really control. You can open the door really well, you can really work on your practice, you can dress well, but you can't really control who goes in and out, but if you're really dutiful and, do your job well, then, the Dalai Lama might walk through someday and so it's really just like being a doorman for ideas. I like to think of it that way. It sort of takes away the ego part of it too. I mean, you're a practitioner. Or another way I like to think of it is like radio waves. Like right now there are radio waves in here and we can't see them or hear them, but if you have a radio and really a good antenna, then you can hear like really beautiful music. So that's, if you keep practicing as an artist and keep your dial tuned, you can this will pass through you. You can be a good conductor that way too. Or like you're standing in a field and the sun is shining down on you and there's a shadow there and that shadow is your artwork. And you're not the creator of it and you can't really control it. all you can do is be a practitioner. But I remember being in art school and a teacher saying to me, you know, you have these two things going that are really strong, but you need a third thing. So like it can be like on a very practical level, the Trinity. And so when I start a painting, like when the paper is fresh, I'll make a mark and sort of go around and, you know, respond to it in two spots. So I'll have these little tiny trinities starting. And, you know, I might do like a tree, and I'll have like three trees, you know, respond, like speaking to each other. Or it's a little bit like the game. Do you guys know the game of set? The game of set is there are shapes, there are patterns, and there are colors, and you arrange them like three of the same shape or three of the same color. So like I think of a painting like objects that have similar weight. So it might be like the head and the 2 feet, or it might be 3 birds. But then you can go on to bigger ideas with the Trinity, like big areas of color, like trinities of big areas of color, or ideas. So like I'm thinking it's narrative, it's sort of biographical, and it's abstract. So I have that Trinity going. And let's see, it's all my notes. So I had one more thing to say. Oh, I also, when I'm making a painting, I like to think about 3 different artists and like jumble them up in my head. So I'll think like David Hockney, Bill Traylor, who's like an amazing folk artist, and de Kooning. And like think about like, what if all those people were embodied in one person? So, and that just like sparks something in my brain. But the ultimate third thing really is something like this, that it's like you're wandering in the woods, and you're wandering for days and days and days, and you're listening to the birds, you're getting really wet or hot, and you're in the woods so long that you just start to feel like you're part of nature. And then you just totally lose your sense of self. And then you come to a little clear pool of water, and all of a sudden you see your face reflected. And you're shocked. And that's like the ultimate third thing for me, is like all of a sudden, when you're not really trying to find something about yourself, all of a sudden you're presented with it. And so that's sort of the ultimate third thing. And that's about what I have to say. I was going to do 3 songs. Yeah. But I wanted to do questions. Should I do songs first or questions first? Okay. Okay, yes.
When you're shocked,
Yes.
is the painting done?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yes.
What was the question?
The question was, when you're shocked, is the painting done?
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like when you have that surprise, when you
Shock is maybe that
yeah,
right word. It's like,
yeah, yes.
When did you start with the sculpture?
When did I start it?
With the sculpture, like
Oh,
manifesting your drawings?
yeah. I'm sorry. I thought I had more images in my show, but I've carved stone a lot, and this past year, a friend passed away, and she was a really amazing gourd grower. And I inherited a lot of this big supply of gourds, and I put them together over the past year. Yeah. Yes?
Would you define alchemical when you talk about alchemical paintings? What does that mean?
I guess it's like, it's like the idea of turning base metals into gold, or,
So, what is that?
the transformation of, the very ordinary and plain.
I understand the word. I just
Yeah.
want to understand what it
Oh.
means for you in your painting.
Oh, okay.
In your
Sorry,
work.
I didn't. Just that. I mean, especially with these new works, like I'm really using the most primitive of materials, most primitive of found objects, and trying to, through force of will, just create something that's alive, basically. Yes?
How's it been like producing one a day?
It was really pretty satisfying once I got going. And it relied a lot more on really preparing and being in the right frame of mind, and not pushing once I was no longer there.
When I'm looking at your paintings, I'd like to, if you will be willing to point out a few actual examples in a particular painting.
Sure. Well, like definitely if I'm having birds in the painting, I'm thinking about that a lot. But it doesn't have to be like 3 of one thing. It could be 5. But I think, like, say in this coffee shop one, I'm thinking of little groups all the time, like how to particular ones, like that, and that, how they work together. And so even though, like, I'm kind of influenced by outsider art and children's art, like, even though I'm using like really basic, almost primitive imagery, the more I layer it, the more complex it gets, and there. But it gets so layered that sometimes you can't see it all. But definitely, like the 3 mountains here in the back. I'm always counting.
Would you say that your paintings are waltzes then?
They're what?
Waltzes.
Waltzes? I guess so. Well, I do think, they're really pretty musical. I do think, yeah. Yes?
How about that halos? I mean, the people seem to have this little glowing.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of a couple of things, it's like influenced by those, like the Giotto frescoes, and but it's also just a way of cutting into the painting. I like to not do anything. For these ones, I was thinking of not being direct, like never doing a direct. Like I wouldn't just draw ahead like that. I would put down a color and then kind of carve it out with the surrounding paint. So it was sort of a useful way to do that too. Yeah. Yes.
Where do you start? Do you start with the environment, with the people, or?
Well, I have like a very simple narrative idea usually for these oil paintings. And then once I get started, I kind of chop it up and I'm thinking of it like an abstract painting sometimes. I go back and forth.
How about for your collages?
For the collages, I was really trying to not have any kind of preconceived notion. I was really just like looking at the paper, making a mark, and just having them form. But at the end, I was thinking about figures. So I had that much in mind. I just like portraits. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, Petey.
I just have to say, having the work here, we've been cracking up and very giddy and very happy. Every single moment, we're kind of checking in, going, what's this all about? So I just wondered, how do Trailer and Romare Bearden affect you?
I love them both. Yeah, I don't know if everybody knows those artists, but Bill Trailer was a African-American folk artist. And he would use pencil. He'd just do these really simple portraits in pencil, and very powerful. And he would draw on shirt cardboards. And, you know, those affect me in a very direct way as an influence. Because it was just like the simple line, being so powerful with such few, with such simplicity. And Romare Bearden, I think that it is sort of like a marriage of those two artists to a big extent. Yeah, I love his work. Yeah.
Do you find that certain characters show up over and over again, or they mean something to you that, oh, there's that guy again, or, I mean, I know the birds repeat, but do the characters...
Yeah, definitely. You know, and a lot of them are sort of the everyman. Mm-hmm. But like, I think of this guy as sort of the everyman, but it's sort of autobiographical too. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them are kind of the eternal feminine woman, but they're also Julie too. Mm-hmm. So. But they're more like types, I think. Yes?
Now, this one, for example, coffee shop. Do you know of this coffee shop? Did you?
Yeah.
Out of your imagination? Or?
Yeah, no, that's Mocha Joe's down the road. But you know, it started out that as Mocha Joe's, but then it's like the wall came down and it became outdoors, and then so you know, it's the same. It's sort of like the same thing as the surprise of seeing yourself. It's like I want to somehow surprise myself, and it helped to break down the wall and have it be outdoors, and to not really know if it was indoors or outdoors, have that mystery. Yes?
Are there plans for a book?
Oh yeah, that's the other thing that I do is I make children's books. And
But a book of?
Oh yeah, no. I'd love to have a book. Yeah.
Some of us can't buy your paintings, we'd like to.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I make children's books too, but they're a little bit different. I want to get to the place where it's more combined, where my children's books and my paintings are more integrated and sort of the same motivation. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Thinking back to your slideshow, the introduction of fabric into your paintings. Could you talk about that? And
yeah. I guess I started with decorative paper. And I might have even started when I was making children's books. But then I found that it was limited what I could use, so I started using my wife's clothing. And she had really, she has really good, really nice.
She was wearing it? Or?
No, like discarded, that's a really nice dress. And, so, yeah, it just has to be thin enough. And I just like the physicality of it. It's more like a quilt. It's more like a sculpture in a way. And it kind of gave me something to, another way to kind of separate myself from it. so it's not just pure, like my hand. It's something more accidental, you know, like I would rip it and or just cut it really roughly with scissors. And so it wasn't so much everything me drawing it. Yeah.
What are you using to adhere the fabric into the oil?
Usually I'll start with acrylic paint, and so I'll glue it down with medium and pretty much seal it, and then I'll work on with oils.
Do the titles tend to come at the beginning, at the end, or somewhere in the middle?
Oh, they usually they usually come from Julia at the end. Generally, usually at the end. Yeah. All right. Well, oh yes, Jim.
Can you talk about the centaur?
The centaur. Well, that was from a photograph that I took of these two incredible black horses on Ames Hill. They used to pass. And I kind of started, this is one of the few where I actually started from a photograph. But then it just felt too realistic, and I had to like break it open and make it a little more mysterious. And yeah, I don't know what it's all about. Yes?
I was wondering if some of the materials you choose have a greater significance other than their color, design, shape. Do they ever come from the world and are associated to a different time or event that somehow gets conveyed into the image?
I think so. I mean, because a lot of it is stuff that Julia's worn. So it's like it has been in my life for a while, and so it does have more sort of personal meaning.
Does that ever direct your focus on the painting or where you want to take it? Perhaps.
I don't know. I don't know if it's so direct like that, but it sort of really puts me in a dream state of where reality is kind of fluid. Because, you know, I'm dealing with, I don't know. I think that's good enough. Yeah. Yeah.
Just wanted to say that since we installed the 10-footer over the atrium,
Oh, yeah.
it's really interesting the feedback that we're getting from people just loving to be around it. It's giving them a sense of joy, of community, and peace, and we've been hearing that, or I've been hearing that. So that's been a real honor to be able to put in that public space and to do this show. But I was curious, because this is such a wonderful new leap, maybe not, but the gourds and the works on paper, where do you see yourself morphing from here, or not?
This is definitely a leaping off point, and I want to sort of pursue it further. I want to figure out how. I think I want to stay on I want to figure out how I can expand it, and I was a little bit influenced by this Picasso show that they had at the museum, where it talked about he talked about the first line he makes, you know, always has that really fresh feeling, and trying to to maintain that right to the end, so that the first mark you make and the last mark you make has that same freshness and feeling of beginning as the first mark. And so I want to try to see if I can. I haven't been able to do it on a larger scale, and I want to like slowly work towards that.
How do you know when it's the last mark?
I don't know. You just kind of know. Yes.
Donald,
Do you want to say something about your limited use of the color red?
Limited use. Well, it's so powerful. I had a red house in this painting here that was just kind of taking over the painting, and I didn't really notice until until Julie told me. And I don't know. I feel like I can't use it that much. It's too powerful, and my paintings are so blue and green because I find that kind of comforting, that just the tiniest bit of red is kind of explosive. So, if that's all, I asked my friend Matthew to come help. We're in a band together called the Bluebird Orchestra. And I'd like to, my other thing, which it's kind of equal weight for me with painting, except I make even less money at music than I do at painting. But as far as importance to me, it's really way up there. So, I wanted to play a little trinity of songs. Which side do you want to be on? Okay. This is Matthew Scharf on the bass here. And this is a song I wrote about. I got kind of obsessed by these science books that I was reading. 10.8 million years ago, at the beginning of time, the universe in the head of a pin. That's the way our love begins. A grain of sand starts to expand, a singularity into infinity. A broken heart starts to fall apart, giving direction to the arrow of time. You can't remember the future. You can't forget the past. Can't put the egg back into its shell. Put the spilled wine back in its glass. A grain of sand starts to expand, a singularity into infinity. A broken heart starts to fall apart, giving direction to the arrow of time. Thank you. And this is one. We just moved to a mountain, on top of a mountain in Marlboro. And this is called a song of the mountain. should I go down to the plains that lie beneath the hills? Up in the mountains beyond the clouds, that's where I plant my fields. Why should I care for the force of written words that no one hears? Shifts of sun and moon, where that twisted tree at last shall be my body. My highest tree holds back the light and shades the world below. The sun and moon and all the stars will rise up from its stones. Why should I care for the force of written words that no one hears? Shifts of sun and moon, where the twisted tree at last shall be my body. In the clouds, beyond the reach, angel or devil, up where the paths are very steep, the mind well level. Why should I care for the force of written words that no one hears? Shifts of sun and moon, where that twisted tree at last shall be my body. Why should I care for the force of written words that no one hears? Shifts of sun and moon, where that twisted tree at last shall be my body. Thank you. And now, to do one more tune, thank you for being so patient and thank you for coming. It's always nicer when there are more people in the audience than there are performers. This is sort of a funny setup here. I usually have a big SD organ, but I borrowed my son's little organetta. So, Julie and I have a puppet theater called the Bluebird Marionette Theater. And Julie makes the puppets, and I write the music, and Matthew plays with us too. And this is from a show that we made based on Goethe's Faust. It's called Green Gold Tree. Everything destructible could only be a parable. Things past description here are done, and done for fair desires won. The ineffable winds laugh through love, eternal Life's pulses beat, again alive. Welcomes the dawning of the day. A steadfast earth again revives. Now in quickened life respires 1,000 voices call to me. From tree to tree to tree to tree. And thus through time we trust and strive with aims as high as man may dare. And from those depths a flame does thrive, a blast that takes us unaware. A fire of love or a glow of hate. Springtime we do supplicate. So let the sun keep at my back. With ecstasy I watch the foam of water flow through cleft of rock, spewing skyward, spume on spume. The image of this life of ours reflected in its blown off color. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming.